Assalamu alaikum. Must be very tired. What language am I speaking today? English or Arabic or Afghan? English. How many of you are saying English? Right, mashallah. How many of you speak more than 2 languages? Excellent. This is Eritrea. When we speak more than 2 languages, that means we are Eritreans. I was in 2004 and 2005, I was in Switzerland, and I was doing some work and research around the Swiss system of governance. And one thing I noticed was, pick up this. I love to speak with my hands sometimes, so I would have preferred to keep it there, but I couldn't. Anyway, so one thing I noticed there was every Swiss person speaks more than 3 languages. And the Swiss constitution recognizes 4 languages as equal languages of the country, constitutionally. The number of the speakers does not matter at all. Swiss German is spoken by around 68%. French Swiss is spoken by about 18%. Italian Swiss is spoken by 5%. And Romansh, the 4th language, is spoken by less than 1%. Yet, all 4 languages are equal on the constitution. And every speaker of any of these 4 languages has the right to go to any government office, including in cantons where a different language is spoken. They can go there and ask to be spoken to in their own language. This is the beauty of democracy when it's measured by the satisfaction it gives to its citizens, regardless of their numeric status, whether it's majority or minority. Now, I'm not going to talk to you for a very long time because we've been here for a long day, and the speakers before me have already covered everything that I was going to cover today. But I'll just give you a few examples of why governance issues are relevant and important to us as Eritreans. First, Eritrea is a new country. And where was it created? Where did it start? Anyone can guess? Anyone can guess? Should I give you a clue? The Italians created Eritrea, but where did it start? The Italians, they must have started somewhere. 1969?
Asab.
Asab, however you pronounce it, it's an Afar town. That's where Eritrea was born in 1969. That is about 20 years before 1869. My apologies. So that's almost 20 years before the king of Italy declared a colony called Eritrea. So Eritrea started in Asab, in Afar land. That's very important. Second, why is Eritrea important? Because of its location in the southern Red Sea. Southern Red Sea is very much linked to Afar's Bab el-Mandeb, which is the southern entrance to the Red Sea. And the Red Sea itself is the link between the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea and beyond the Atlantic Ocean. Now, that is a very important maritime lane, and many of the oil and the goods go through this route. So if the Suez Canal in the north of the Red Sea is important, the southern door, which is the Bab el-Mandeb, and Bab means in Arabic, door, it's also very important, and it lies within the Afar territories, especially the western side of it. So that's very important to recognize. Now, so we need to have discussions around issues of governance. A, as I said, because we are a new country. And the second, or B, is we as citizens of this country, the common denominator for all of us was the foreign ruler, right? Italians, Ethiopians, and so on, and the Red Sea between, of course. Once they left, we cannot go to the pre-Italian situation, can we? That's the dilemma we Africans face all the time. Because when colonialists come, they destroy whatever that had existed. And they build their own system. And they impose it on us through dictatorship. So dictatorship, by the way, is inherited from colonials. Yes, Britain was democracy, parliamentary democracy. Yes, France was democracy, and so on. But the colonies they ruled were ruled by dictatorship, top down, military or otherwise. Once that common denominator has moved, then the people of the colonies should have come together to agree on how to maintain this new relationship that has been imposed and became a de facto. So we cannot go back to a pre-colonial system, but we cannot also coexist unless we respect each other and we respect our diversity. Now, we should have done that, but we Eritreans were not fortunate enough. So there was a lot of conspiracies. I'm not going to take you through that history, but at least once we fought for our independence. And by the way, the struggle for independence started in 1941. President Isias Afwerki was born, or my good friend Dan Kale was born. That's right before the day. So that means after over 60 or nearly 8 years of struggle, but let's say 6 years for freedom, we should have had a chance in 1991 or 1993 to agree on a system of governance that can accommodate our diversity, the diversity of beauty, beautiful languages, cultures, traditions, and so on. We should have had that. But unfortunately, again, the tyranny, the homegrown tyranny, stopped from us from starting from that point. So we are still waiting for the removal of tyranny so we can again start on the right premise. And this is why the issue of governance is very important. And this is also why we discuss issues of constitution. So we're not going to live the way we are now forever. There will be change, but when that change comes, we need to be ready to make sure we don't commit the same mistakes that we've committed or we've allowed to be committed in 1991. So we need to make sure we have well-recognized constitutions, ideas for us to keep us together. Keeping us together means not compromising on our differences, but accepting the differences, respecting them, and living with them. So that's very important. So how many reasons did I mention? 2 or 3, right? 3. So the first one is Eritrea has to speak about decentralization, which is a form of governance. Decentralization means avoiding the concentration of power in the hands of one president or one party or one city, capital city. So it has to be spread, devolved into the regions. That's how we ensure inclusive governance. That's how we ensure the democracy we talk about goes all the way to the village level, where people are allowed to elect their own governors from the village to the district to the region up to the level of the nation, of the national. We are not bringing this kind of idea out of the blue. In Eritrea, I think Professor Magnet was mentioning customary laws. Customary laws have been practiced in Eritrea for centuries, to this day, by the way, because most of the Eritreans live in rural areas where there are no governments, police officers, judges, and courts. The courts are under the shade of tree, and people gather under the leadership of their tribe or village, Qa'adi. They come together by Qa'adi and then discuss issues from economic, land disputes to any kind of problems the community has. And they resolve it. And guess what? The resolution that passes in that kind of meeting, it becomes effective immediately. And one thing that always, I feel sorry that we do not even appreciate this, those villages, they don't have police officers to enforce the law or the rules of the council, of the village council or the tribal council. It's enforced by the will of the people. That means the tradition of respecting the law is very much entrenched into the society's culture and history. How many of you speak Tigrinya? Several of you. Zban Hadi, if someone tells you, Zban Hadi means, can someone help me translate into English? By the rule of law. I want you to stay here until I bring someone to arbitrate between us. You stop and stay there. You don't move at all. However big and powerful it may be, one tiny person can tell you, you're not allowed to move from this spot until we get this issue resolved between you. And the person will stay. So this is the traditional rule of law, of respecting the law, and so on. So since we have self-rule tradition in Eritrea, we have to maintain and develop it bottom up. We're not saying American system, British system, or French, or whatever, to be imposed on Eritreans. No, we are saying we have the tradition there. All we need to do is to explore and highlight and then enrich, develop it. That's what we're asking for. Now, since that's the case, then the second issue becomes the shared rule, which is how do we share power? Again, you need institutions to do that. You need parliaments to do that. So through those parliaments, you make sure the population of Eritrea, with all their differences, are accommodated through these institutions. So at the local level, they are allowed to self-rule, and then at the national level, they are allowed to share rule. We all come together. In fact, I am one of those proponents who would say the executive council at the national level should be executive council, not executive president. That's the Swiss system. So what we can do, we don't need one Isaias or one Muhammad. We can have several people to represent the diversity, the gender equality between men and women, and so on. So you can have 7 or 10 member council, executive council, to work together to address the issues of their nation. So we can create those institutions to maintain that diversity, the shared rule, and so on. The final point I want to highlight is the 1952 Constitution. Again, it was mentioned by Professor Magnet. Now, for me, that Constitution is the first and the only legitimate document the Eritreans produced. In 1997, I have the same view as Professor Magnet, and this is, I've written about it long time ago. The Constitution's value and legality or legitimacy is not by the contents of the document itself, but by the process that was used to produce that document. So the 1997 Constitution, it was produced, first of all, under absence of freedom of expression, freedom of association. There was no party allowed. And then at the same time, people were also snatched from their homes and workplaces and disappeared. So the atmosphere of fear was there. You cannot have free discussions. Even when Mengistu used to gather a lot of people on the 2nd of whatever, September was it, the revolutionary day, and people would come out. Of course, they have to go out and appear to be celebrating the revolution, the Ethiopian revolution, but that does not mean they are trans or even Ethiopians were in support of Mengistu. So gathering people in a hall under a dictatorial system does not really reflect the freedom that people should enjoy. So there was that problem. The second problem was the parliament that ratified that document itself was not represented. 50% or more of it were EPLF members, one party, and the rest also EPLF associates. So there's a serious problem. But within that, we will not discuss that. But the 1952 Constitution has very important articles that recognize diversity, both at the national level and at the local level. At the national level, now I'm not going to go through the documents, but I've sent them to Ahmed. The articles that I identified. One of them discusses, for example, advises the chief executive, they call it, that's the prime minister, to ensure his government, the members or the ministers are representative of the people's diversity. That was very important. Second, the local people from the village should be allowed or enabled to elect their own governors, rulers. So that's also very important at the local level, the self-rule. And the 1952 Constitution also goes beyond that and gives rights to non-Eritreans living in Eritrea, the foreign communities, to practice their own customs, their own traditions. No one in constitutions, normally you don't put such rights because those rights can be enforced by governments and they can be introduced by governments and they can be changed from time to time. But to put them in a constitution, that means you've made them static because you don't change constitutions every now and then. It takes time. The process itself takes time. Yes, you can change, but it takes time. But to stipulate rights for non-Eritrean residents of Eritrea to the extent of ruling or practicing their own laws in their personal affairs shows to what extent this constitution was liberal, very inclusive of all Eritreans. So with that, I'd like to end my talk by thanking the brothers from the Afar National Congress, the Eritrean Afar National Congress, and all of you for attending today's event. And again, thank you so much for all of you and for the nice food. And I would love now to dance one Afar dance once Dan Cornell and the rest speaks. We will join together. I haven't danced the Afari dance for a while, so I'm going to practice that today, inshallah. Thank you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.